Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I'm going to touch on a couple of different things Dogman related. I got a couple of encounters to share with you. I also have a couple of interesting news articles that I just happened to come across. One being from the New York Times back in 1974. Before we get into today's upload, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now, I've taken enough of your time, everyone. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first part of the upload is a news article out of Russia, and it just goes to show that it's just not the U.S. and other countries that try to hide the truth. A schoolgirl was savaged to death by a brown bear that invaded her village and attacked the 14-year-old girl when she went out to her local shop to buy juice and chocolate. Sonia Cherniagova died from neck, face, and head injuries, which locals initially believed were inflicted by a wolf, but found bear footprints, and they were found at the scene in the center of Yodva village in Russia's Komi Republic. Her face was disfigured, and her neck was almost severed by deep bites from the wild animal, which also ripped out her hair in a violent attack, which was so bad her father, Sergei, did not initially recognize her. He had gone out to search for her after she failed to return from the local shop at around 10 p.m. Sonia's mutilated corpse had been found by a local teenage boy, who also did not recognize her because of the shocking wounds. I did not want to believe that was my daughter in front of my eyes, her father says. Her face was all disfigured. It was impossible to recognize her. She was dressed just like the other girls, only her jacket was recognizable. He then pulled out his phone and called his daughter. It was clear when he dialed her mobile phone and the phone rang in the pocket of her jacket, he said. The girl was described as a good student who took an active part in the local drama and music performances. The village has been under siege by both bear and wolves in recent weeks. Local media reports said the villagers were on edge from the attack. A video shows a bear prowling the Yodva village in late May. It is not known if this was the same beast that attacked Sonia. The bear was probably seeking waste food from rubbish skips when it attacked the girl at around 9:45 p.m., when it was still light. Nikolai Gorbanov, the chairman of the Yudorsky District Society of Hunters and Fishermen, told local media most likely the bear was eating something at the dump. The girl happened to be close and disturbed the predator. Experienced hunters have studied the accident scene and confirmed there were bear footprints, he said. A wolf cannot disfigure a human being in such a way. Such wounds can only be inflicted by a predator with large claws. The girl's injuries were also consistent with a bear attack. The predators often scalp their victims, he said. A criminal investigation has been opened, which will examine if local officials took sufficient action to deter wild animals from the village, which is 145 miles north of the regional capital of Saikartvi. Charges could be brought for officials' negligence. Hunters are expected to be given licenses to kill local bears following the attack on the schoolgirl. I do not buy it. I just don't. There's a couple of reasons that I'll express. I'd like to hear your guys' view in the comment section. My first reason why I don't buy it is because, first things first, they said it was a wolf attack. That means it was obvious that there was paw prints around the area that the child was found that they thought was a wolf. Obviously big, because then they were like, oh, this is a bear. Then the way the child was just destroyed. I mean, this poor child was ravaged and in the middle of town, not by a dump. Notice they say a bear was by the dump. This happened in the middle of town as the kid was coming back from the store. Teenage kids, boys, other boys, came across her dead body. So, I mean, there's just not a lot adding up. The only thing that is real to me is the sentence that says, such wounds can only be inflicted by a predator with large claws. I just, honestly, if it was a bear attack, that poor little girl would have been screaming at the top of her friggin' lungs. A Dogman, in my eyes, would be a silent, stealthful killer. Criminal investigation opened to see if the officials of the town took sufficient action. Just that whole sentence right there is just like, hey, this is a filler to have people not go any. Okay, well, obviously it was a bear or a wolf. We better not ask any questions because there's an official investigation going on. And then there's nothing afterward. Not one mention of what happened. Also, the bear was seen in late May. This was August. 3 months had gone by. That bear, I mean, is probably long gone. 3 months. Yes, some do stick around the area, but this one I don't buy. I do not buy it. I think it's rather strange. And I think 100% Dogman. Let me know what you guys think. Today's second part of the upload is an encounter. I have a long-standing relation to the land this happened on, as my family has hunted this area since 1947, and some of my first memories are here. I have seen many odd things over the years at this place. Starting at the age of 14, these include cryptid, UFO, aerial phenomenon, something I would consider time slippage and gateway effects. These seem to have increased as the land is less used, and my family, other than myself, has ceased to use it. As the Clavet, my father, who is the most Christian, religious, straight-laced person I know, has seen UFO and aerial phenomenon in this area. Lastly, the area I'm speaking of is located in one of the northmost counties of Wisconsin. Specifically, it is a 3 square mile section of land within an area of 7 miles by 25 miles without a paved road, town, or permit dwelling. Hard to believe, but there are still places like this. So, on with the story. This took place in 2008. I had moved back to Wisconsin after being in the Marines and then working as a hunting guide. And this was my second year of really being back and hunting seriously in this area. I'd been out putting up 2 new deer stands and was coming back to my vehicle from putting up the second one. I was carrying a large frame Alice pack with a bunch of gear, had a belt with a knife and a .22 pistol, and was holding a bow saw in one hand. I'd parked down the road, which was basically a path big enough to drive a truck down, that my grandfather had cut in many years prior. I was approximately a quarter of a mile from the nearest logging road, which wasn't even a normal dirt road either, so pretty far from anything. As I exited the woods, the area in front of me was open for approximately 400 yards, with small pines about 2 feet tall. And then it ended with older growth pine 80 or so feet tall. This area had been logged and replanted, but hadn't been cleaned up, so there were a lot of limbs and brush growing between the furrows. To my left, there was older growth mixed forest, which ran from where I had come out of, and then all the way to the pine rows 400 yards away. I came out of the woods to where my vehicle was parked, and as I did, I saw movement out in the open area. As I'm used to seeing deer, bear, coyote, and wolf, I didn't think too much of it. I was driving in a Zuzu rodeo at the time, and I had opened both the front and rear door on the side opposite of the open area, and I was putting my pack and gear inside. As I was doing this, I caught more movement through the windows facing that direction. I kind of quit putting up my stuff and stood up on the running boards that looked over the roof of the rodeo to get a good look at what was out there. As I did this, I saw something pop up out in the open area approximately 60 or so yards away. In my mind, I saw it as a wolf standing on its hind legs. And since I've hunted many coyote and have seen them do this, my first reaction was to think, I guess wolves do this too. I wasn't scared or anything at this point. So I stood there on the running boards for a few seconds, and this thing just stared right back at me. It seemed to tilt its head and look to the right, which was the deeper woods, and then back to me. I remember thinking that was odd, because in my mind, having been a hunting guide and having observed many animals, I didn't think a wolf should have been able to turn its head like that while standing. I'm sure this lasted no more than a minute with us looking at each other. And then it started walking forward a couple of steps. As it did this, I don't think my mind really comprehended it. I've seen coyote hop and such, but this was a measured step. It never moved fast, just steady, and it started angling towards the woods, which were maybe 20 or so yards away from where it stood. So it was moving slightly towards me, but more to my left. By the time it had walked to the edge of the woods, it was maybe 30 yards from the front of my vehicle. It kept its eyes on me, and I kept my eyes on its head mainly. At this point, I was getting a bit freaked. I don't really know how to describe this thing. I have thought about it quite a few times over the years, but I don't know what to call it. I don't think it was a man who turned into a wolf, or even what most people would think as a dogman. To me, it was a wolf, who was something more. The overwhelming sense I have was of a primitive spirit that maybe the Native Americans knew of, but we have forgotten. It looks and acts like a wolf, but it is something more than that. The truest way I can describe the feeling, and I have thought much about it, is this. I am showing this to you, and I can do this all the time. And now you know my secret. I don't necessarily think this was a good being. I don't know if it was evil, but it wasn't good. It was beyond what I can make sense of. As to size, it's hard to judge, but it would probably be the size of a normal wolf, although it appeared somewhat thin in its erect position. I would estimate it to be 6 to 7 feet tall. I didn't try to figure it out at the time, and I can only go off of what I perceived in relation to the trees. I didn't really see its legs in full, as it was moving through the brush and furrows. But I don't think it had those reverse joints like you sometimes see depicted in the movies or drawings of werewolves. Its shoulders were rather large, and its arms hung lower than you would picture a normal wolf, if it was in that position. But I didn't take enough note to see if it had hands or still the paws. I pretty much never took my eyes away from its head. It held its arms more relaxed and lower. Not quite man-like, but not out in front like you see dogs sometimes do. The fur of this thing was mainly black and gray. I can't remember what color its eyes were, but I don't remember them being orange or red like you sometimes hear. It never opened its mouth fully, but I do remember glimpses of teeth. It had erect ears like a normal wolf. The way it turned its head is why I know it wasn't a normal creature. It kept angling its head and body to keep me in view, which I have replayed many times in my mind. And it was what I remember best. In all, this whole encounter lasted maybe 3 minutes, from the time it stood up until it disappeared into the woods. It walked about 45 yards in total like that, and moved about 30 yards closer from me to where it initially saw it. I eventually did go back and walk the route as best I could. I still spend a lot of time in this area, and I have never seen it since. A couple of things extra. I believe this thing had been traveling on 4 legs to begin with, and probably does it as a rule. I think when it stood up, it made a conscious decision to continue walking on 2 legs. I don't know the reason for this, but I have always felt it knew when it turned its head that it had shown me it was not completely a normal wolf, and thought, screw it, I'll show him what I really am. Okay, I normally wait until the end, unless it's news articles that I want to just demolish, to talk about encounters. This guy clearly saw a Dogman. He's in Wisconsin, the northernmost part. And he is trying to, in my mind, and probably a lot of yours who have had your own encounters, know that you try to rationalize what you have just seen. He, instead of thinking this is a Dogman, a living, breathing creature of pain and destruction, he wants to classify it as a spirit ghost or a spirit walker or some kind of Native American being. I'm not going to call it a skinwalker because it's not on Navajo property. Dude saw a Dogman, and hopefully one day he'll come to terms with, I saw a Dogman. Today's third part of the upload is the very interesting yet shocking news article I found that's 46 years old. When I found it, my jaw literally dropped. Here goes. New York Times, February 24th, 1974. Coy dog, coy wolf, or werewolf. Since the almost total extermination of the eastern timber wolf, the cougar, and the bear, predators have been conspicuously absent in the Northeast. But persistent reports of a mysterious coyote-like creature has been coming out of New England for several years. Such reports have alarmed many hunters who believe they can better perform the predator function of culling excess deer and other game. But conservationists are pleased. They hope that the coyote-like creature signals a return to a better balance of nature. No North American species has suffered more from man's arsenal of death-dealing weapons and still survived than the coyote. 2 years ago, President Nixon banned poison from public lands, and in doing so incurred the wrath of sheep ranchers who pasture flocks there, as most wool growers allow their animals to range the public domain unattended. Saturation poisoning of the nation's wild predator has been their principal method of protecting their flocks. But while the toxin succeeded only in depressing the coyote population, they have had a devastating effect on many other species, including bear, badger, kit fox endangered, skunks, wolves endangered, lynx endangered, as well as eagles, condors endangered, and other birds. Recent lobbying efforts by wool growers to have the ban on poisoning rescinded has therefore aroused much opposition and inspired New York's Jacob Javits to seek support from other members of the Senate to back the presidential ban. The Indians held the coyote in high regard. The Navajo referred to him as God's dog, but to the white man, he was a varmint, and his appearance of few new locations has excited much hysteria. In West Virginia, a solitary coyote was relentlessly hunted by posses with foxhounds and an airplane until it was killed after 18 months at a reputed cost of $75,000. Unrelenting pressure on the coyote on his natural range in the West may have caused some to migrate eastward. Also, the virtual extinction of so many stronger predator species has opened up a good habitat and food sources previously unavailable to the small coyote, who weighs only 20 to 40 pounds. But whether or not he made his own way to the East Coast remains unknown. A possibility remains that the animal in question are descendants of escapees from zoos or released pets. Just such speculation was offered by J. Frank Dobie, the Western historian who wrote The Voice of the Coyote, when he observed in 1947 that during the preceding quarter of the century, Canis latrans had been seen in every state of the Union except Delaware. Indeed, historical records document the presence of an occasional coyote in the upper New York State area since 1912, and some old-timers assert they've always been there. Though, what they are recalling is probably the now Van Timber wolf. In the late 1950s, rumors of a strange creature larger than a coyote but smaller than a wolf began to circulate in Vermont. Shortly thereafter, New Hampshire reported the same phenomenon. In the 60s, when a den containing 5 pups of an unidentified species was discovered near Croton, New Hampshire, serious studies were undertaken to determine just what the animal might be. My initial opinion was that the creature was a coy dog, the hybrid offspring of a wild coyote and a domestic dog. It wasn't until I learned the animal was breeding true, bearing offspring that was consistently uniform in appearance, that I began to wonder. Second-generation hybrid predictably exhibit great variability, some resembling each grandparent in a kind of Thorvik back phenomenon. Moreover, the wild canids were producing offspring in the spring of the year, when a coy dog hybrid does not whelp. In 1972, I decided to make a trip to New England to investigate. I stopped in Concord, New Hampshire, to see a biologist, Helen Silver, senior author of behavioral study of the animal funded by the National Science Foundation. She had mentioned that her project had opposed by sportsmen in her state, who incorrectly assumed that money was being diverted from the New Hampshire State Fish and Game Department to investigate a non-target species. The public as well had been stirred up against the mysterious animal by journalists who couldn't resist playing up the story and elaborating on possibilities of allowing a weird race of wild dogs to breed. Some even suggested that the New England woodlands were haunted by werewolves, free-roaming domestic dogs, which were said to have killed 550 deer in New Hampshire from 1969 to 71, had excited much agitation among sportsmen. Many people now took the position that a mysterious canine were nothing but domestic dogs gone feral. The sooner the scourge could be eliminated, the better. In 61, the New Hampshire legislature added to the state's bounty law the timber wolf and prairie wolf, for want of a better definition of the unknown creature. Like all bounties, this one invited fraud. People began to shoot their neighbors' dogs and to present the body for money. As a result, the law was again amended in 1965 to exempt the timber wolf and the prairie wolf. While New Ramp was paying to get rid of the unidentified beast, no proof existed that it had caused anybody any harm. Tracks around half-eaten deer carcasses excited many stories. However, as carrion makes up the major winter food of the wild coyote, there was a strong likelihood that the New Hampshire canine had not killed the animal they were feeding upon. A study of the stomach contents of 27 wild canines shot over a 2-year period of time showed that the presence of deer meat corresponded with the start of each hunting season, when some wounded game evaded a hunter but died anyway. At least 4 stomachs contained maggots, and 3 had carrion beetles, proof that the wild canine was to some extent a scavenger. In any case, many knowledgeable people believe that the New England deer herd could only benefit from the return of the region of the effective predator. Wild predators, unlike pet dogs, do not trot home to a bowl of ration after the energies of a chase, but must continue to seek food. Therefore, most wild predator species have evolved into opportunistic hunters, pursuing only easy prey. Weak, diseased, and genetically abnormal game become their frequent victim. And the result is a healthier prey population. By contrast, the human hunter tries to select prime animals for his target. This predator-prey interaction, as well understood by New Hampshire state fish and game officials, many of whom confided that they would welcome the return of even wolves or mountain lion to the region. But since the rank-and-file hunters have held more simplistic views and resented the loss of even a single game animal, the agency has remaining non-committal on the subject of the mysterious canine. One field officer told me that the deer herd were at a low point and had been for 2 or 3 years. It's a cyclic phenomenon, probably weather-related, he explained. But you can bet the new animal is going to be blamed when hunters don't find a deer behind every tree. The coyote is unique to North America. The primal times he occupied the Great Plains in such numbers that the first Anglo explorers named him Prairie Wolf. He might as logically have been given the title Desert Wolf or Little Wolf of the Mountains, for early records show him simultaneously thriving in southern Mexico and northern Rockies. To the limited degree, he was also found in areas east of Mississippi, in Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. In honor of his abundant presence, the French in 1765 christened their frontier settlement in Wisconsin Prairie du Chien. Westerners can't make up their minds whether to call the animal coyote or coyote. The name comes from the Aztec Coyotl. The animal has other names as well. Some of the latest ones seem to be attempts to convey the type of habitat where he is currently being seen. He's acquired the title brush wolf in Minnesota, where intensive agriculture has driven an indigenous subspecies from the state's southern prairies northward into third-growth forests, heavily thrusted with undergrowth. In the New York Adirondacks, yay, my hometown, bushwolf is a variation, the theme. Just this ability to adapt by changing circumstances, of course, is what has enabled the Pro-10 species to survive the traps, poison, and aerial shoots that have exerted so many of the predators in North America. He is opportunistic in the extreme, hunting by day as well by night, dining on fresh meat of carrion, raiding town garbage pits, or feasting on wild fruit and berry, denning in burrows or yelps in conduit pipes, running in packs or alone. Bold coyote can be seen in alleyways of Los Angeles, but shy ones may be heard only in the wilderness, filling the surrounding areas with their soulful cadence. The coyote's greatest asset is that nature has not completely defined him, not firmly set the successful adjustments the species has made over long ages of natural selection, while the more finished North American animals, those perfected for existence in their special niches, were rapidly vanquished when an industrial society began to reshape their habitats. The coyote met change with change, reshaping himself, unlike the bison, the passenger pigeon, and the wolf. He is thus still with us in multiple numbers. It comes as no surprise, therefore, to find Canis latrans as a highly valuable veritable body. In Mammals of North America, E. Raymond Hall and Keith R. Kelson identify 19 subspecies. Some naturalists feel this number is too high, and that the splintering of species has been carried too far. They accuse the taxidermists of arbitrary creation based on minuscule skull and tooth differences intended to confound those who study living specimen at a distance. Nevertheless, the coyote does vary from place to place, with the larger subspecies occurring in the northern Rockies, Minnesota, and Texas. Obviously, these differences suggest a high potential for mutation. A lot of you are going to say that had nothing to do with Dogman and probably shit on that part. But a lot of you are like me and just found it completely interesting. I am fascinated with all of nature's animals, especially around my area in the Adirondacks. We have coyote right in my parents' backyard. My daughter and I actually saw a coyote pup down the road from my parents. There's a cemetery with a large wooded area behind it, and it was about the size of a beagle, but absolutely a gorgeous specimen of nature's beauty. And I'm sorry if a few of you didn't like it, but oh well. Now, on to some creepy shit. Today's fourth part of the upload is a terrifying encounter. Around 1978 or so, my mom, dad, brother, and little sister and I lived in Macon County, Georgia. We lived on Highway 49, and we had a handful of run-ins with the Sasquatch and his offspring. The first time we saw it was when it came up to my infant sister's window, and she was mocking it. I think it got confused one night and went to my mom's window and started grunting. It scared my mom so bad she tried to climb up under my dad. He told her he thought it was probably a bear. That is, until he saw it for himself. My mother went outside one night to get a note off of the door, and it was about 10 feet away at most from her. She ran back inside, and when she was able to speak, she told my dad what she had seen. My dad went into the bathroom and shot the larger one. One night we had an acetylene tanks being thrown around by the larger one. She said he was black-haired from head to toe, arms were past the waistline. Nose was not like a gorilla's, was more like a human nose. We heard a noise outside one night and went out to look and found hair embedded into the wall of the outside of the house. It always came to the house at night. It was very curious, always looking into the windows. My aunt heard something one night and ran so fast that she actually put an indentation into the wall of my house. My dad said one night all of my uncles came over and they were looking around the house for it, and one of my uncles yelled down from the roof of the house that my dad was leaning against, and when he turned around and looked up at it, it got spooked and beat the hood of the Jeep and destroyed it. In our area where we lived, there was always goats and cows and etc. found with their intestines gone. No meat was eaten. It always smelled like a septic tank when it came around. We went outside the next day after an incident with it. We went outside and our neighbor who owned cows had 5 cows lying on their side, dead with their insides gone, next to the cow field where the pond was. Then, when I was about 14 years old, we moved back to almost the exact spot we lived when we had the experience at the first time. We cleared the woods across from where we lived before so we could put a trailer on the property. I was sleeping one night and thought my alarm went off. I checked it, and apparently it was some other noise that woke me up. I looked out the window and saw an 8-foot-tall, hairy creature running from my window. My dad went outside right away and did a cast of footprint. We had a friend who was a game warden when we lived in West Palm, Florida, who went out and was recording what she thought was a bear. She was in her vehicle out in the middle of the woods. On the recording, we heard a howl-like sound that was unlike anything we had ever heard. It sent chills up our spine, and then it started shaking her vehicle side to side. Then it ran off. In November of '78, the family became aware of noises coming from outside the children's window. 3 children shared a room, and the 6-month-old crib was nearest the window. The sounds were mimicking a baby's cooing. The sounds would come at night and last for about 30 minutes at a time. The older children, ages 3 and 4, would see dark brown furry head in the window and would run to their parents crying a boogeyman was outside. The parents thought the children were imagining things as they would not hear or see anything. This went on for months, and the children would end up sleeping with their parents when they heard or saw things out of their window. In the summer of '79, the mother went out to feed the dogs their dinner scraps. When she went outside, stepped off the porch, and came face to face with a large, hair-covered bipedal man. Frightened for her life, she ran inside to her husband. He grabbed a gun and, shooting blindly through the wooden wall, he fired at where the creature was standing. To this day, the bullet hole is still in the wall. The entire house immediately was permeated with the smell. It's described as a strong septic and dead animal smell. Although no blood was found, the father thought that he had hit the creature and it ran into the woods. The next night, a smaller creature returned to the house after midnight. The mother heard grunting outside her window. The creature was clearly agitated as it picked up welding tanks, 90 pounds, and they were stored on the property, and threw them at the house. The family watched from the window. The police were called and found only the scattered tanks when they arrived. The family was so frightened they called their relatives for several nights to come guard the house. Some walked the perimeter. One was on the roof. All had guns. One night the uncle was on the roof and noticed movement behind the dad and shouted, "Behind you!" At the same time the father backed up to what he thought was a tree. only it had moved. Both ran in different directions, the father toward the house, the creature toward the woods, but not before slamming into the hood of the car. It left 3 large dents in the Jeep. Again, the police were called and found nothing. The family is of Cherokee heritage. They called a Blackfoot chief wife over to do a ritual to protect them. Things calmed down after that, but from time to time, over several years, other things were noted. Years later, during dinner, the aunt caught sight of a creature looking into the window and watching them. She was so frightened she literally ran through the drywall into another room. This is confirmed by all of the family members. When the daughter was about 14, she woke up at 1 a.m. to the sound of her alarm clock outside the window. Going to the window, she saw a creature running away. The next day, her father and uncle were able to find a track and followed it into the woods. Eventually losing it, a cast was made from the large footprint under the bedroom window. Another time during the summer, after the mother and children went into town, they came home and heard thumping noises from the crawl space under the house. The sounds were coming from under the bathroom, where the water from the shower drained directly under the house. They could see the creature stuck under the house. The bare soles of its feet were visible, and the smell was throughout the house. The smell was not as strong as it had been when the father had shot at one. The creature was heard throughout the day, and eventually was able to get out that night. It was gone the next morning. During these years, the surrounding farms had cows, sheep, and goats killed. It seemed only the intestines were taken. Clearly, the family had at least 2 creatures that lived near their property and visited regularly. After the father shot at the larger one 8 feet, only the smaller one, 7 feet, was seen. Both appeared to be male, as no breasts were seen. Both creatures were dark brown. It should be noted that several Bigfoot behavioral theories occurred during this habitation. Curiosity for children, mimicking of sounds, looking into windows, livestock killed and eaten in a particular manner, smelling putrid and throwing objects. The family no longer lives in Georgia, but the house still stands, and no activity has been reported by the current tenants. Today's 5th part of the upload is 2 very interesting news articles calling a creature that I believe to be a dogman a chupacabra. Check it out. June 25th, Simpson County, Mississippi. A Simpson County man says he's been hunting for 50 years but recently killed something he's never seen before. It's an ugly-looking beast, Mr. Bernard says. I know it's not a coyote. I've killed some mangy coyotes as well, and I just haven't seen something quite like it. Friend and family believe it could be a chupacabra, which means goat sucker. Chupacabra are legendary creatures suspected of killing livestock and sucking blood. A couple of weeks ago, in the middle of the afternoon, Mr. Bernard was on his property in Simpson County, just outside of Mendenhall, when a funny-looking animal walked through the open field about 130 yards away. He could immediately tell the animal didn't have any hair, but when he looked through his rifle scope, he saw something very strange. The animal's back legs were several inches taller than its front legs. His ears were rounded. He had no hair, and his teeth were very long. And a group of buzzards wouldn't touch it. I've never seen anything a buzzard wouldn't eat. The mysterious animal was to become pretty popular in Mendenhall, and several people have reported sightings of other strange animals since the news of this one spread. I've seen several different things they say we don't have in Mississippi, so finding this creature wasn't a big deal to him. Here's the second newspaper article, June 30th, Pearl River County, Mississippi. An unwanted visitor has made himself at home in a quiet town. If a zombie had a dog, it would look like that, states Jennifer Whitfield. She and her 11-year-old son Justin spotted a mysterious creature on the lot near their home. They weren't sure what to think, but Justin believed it to be the chupacabra. That's when they discovered they weren't the only ones to spot an animal when they talked about it online. A few streets over, the Dentons were already on the case. I kept looking up hairless coyote, and it kept saying chupacabra, Amanda Denton states. We've been running back and forth to our cars because we didn't want the chupacabra to get us. Her husband, Jonathan, was at a loss as well. I didn't know what it was, but then animal control couldn't find it, so maybe it was the chupacabra. Right up the road, the Cooper family presented another possibility. My dad said that it was a Sasquatch dog. He's become obsessed with watching Finding Bigfoot, says 17-year-old Caroline Cooper. Despite their Sasquatch dog theory, the Coopers wanted an expert opinion, so they called the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Master Sergeant David Burnett states the creature was a coyote with mange. It's pretty sick, weak, and unable to hunt on its own, so it's going for the nearest food source it can find. He said the coyote was sticking around for garbage and pet food, keeping it alive, but that it should not be considered a threat to the community as long as they keep their distance. The legend of the El Chupacabra dates back to the 70s. The term literally translates to goat sucker because the creature is believed to have sucked the blood of goats. To date, no actual chupacabra has ever been caught, and apparently the myth will not be debunked. Alright guys, there you have it, tonight's upload. 2 really awesome encounters. 3 newspaper articles. I know I'm going to get shit for the coyote one, but I don't care. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. I liked it, and I know some of you and a lot of you probably will, because just like I said, you guys are fascinated by everything. I find it interesting that the coyote is such a resilient creature. It's like the cockroach of mammals, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate all the support, and I got a bunch of stuff lined up for you guys to keep you occupied for the rest of my favorite month of the year, October. It's here. We might get snow tonight in upstate New York in the foothills of the Adirondacks, and I'm not liking that. That's not cool. Snow? October 16th. No. 17th. Excuse me. It was cold last night. It was like 37 degrees. Right now it's about 35. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Anyway. Guys, have a good night. Stay safe. And thanks for all the support. I really do appreciate it. With that, farewell.